Kinshasa is 2,000 kilometers from here. Okay? So Ugandan who is in Kinshasa can only be accounted for by Ugandan embassy, which was attacked. A Ugandan who is in Goma would be accounted for by indeed either the Congolese or MONUSCO, because we do not have a force. We have an office, a liaison office, which at one point, by the way, the Congolese had closed with those kind of accusations. And what worries me is that if a Ugandan can think like that about his own country, what about a common Congolese that has had this rhetoric from some of the leaders inside that country? I had a debate with a member of the Senate from North Kivu, who is a Mnyarwanda speaker, but that is not part of the M23 ethnic group. And his talk was very venomous. Very venomous. You could hear the man hating his fellow Banyarwanda, but just because the physical features are different. The ethnization of the violence in Eastern Congo falls short of being the actual genocide that we saw in Rwanda in 1994. But you see, in my view, those are simply symptoms of a problem. When people fail to address the real causes of the problem, they must look for scapegoats. And for me, like I said, a genuine discussion of these things by first and foremost the nationals themselves. See, Uganda is an example. We were in conflict for 24 years, and then plus 20 in northern Uganda and the northeastern Uganda. That makes them 44. How have we managed to deal with this? It was not through external actors. We looked at this problem squarely. But Uganda's lack was a leadership that had the correct lenses of understanding the issues, dealing with them politically, and where it failed, the military approach was used. But it was the last approach. It was the last resort rather. Similarly, in all African countries, if there is a lack of local capacity to understand the issues and deal with them squarely, you will always have a vacuum and to be exploited by negative forces. You yourself said there are 120. There are actually 136 negative forces in DRC. And you see, the talk is about M23 alone, as if once M23 puts down their guns, the problem has been solved. And the answer is no. To the north, you have the Hemaland conflict, which again, I witnessed when I was in Ituri myself, where we enabled the Rendo and Hema to sit together on a radio station, and they confessed that since the earth was created, the two communities had never sat in one room. And these are people who live together. They could never. But because we were the big brother at that time, in 2002, 2003, they agreed, and because I told them, come and talk to each other what the problem is, instead of killing each other. And they had just massacred 1,000 people in Drodro, on the other side of Lake Albert. So the issues we are talking about are about, as Dr. Chionga put it, huge losses of lives. And we cannot continue seeing this happening. And when I hear questions like people from Honorable Ken Richards who sought to lead this country, and they're saying Uganda has no business being in Congo, I worry about the future of this country. That if those are people who want to lead our country, and they reason that way, they think you can only be here in a cocoon and you are safe, it's daydreaming. His own language says when your neighbor's house has fire, has caught fire, your house is not safe. It's a traditional African wisdom that many of us who put on ties and have gone to school fail to appreciate. Lastly, we have a duty as Pan-Africanists. We have an obligation to help our brothers and sisters also enjoy peace. Now, as he said, the African solution to African problems is a fallacy. I don't think it's a fallacy. The only weakness, in my view, is our inability to put money where our mouths are. We are talking of these problems, are we able to finance them? You can be sure everybody is telling you the template of AMISOM in Somalia is the best on the continent to deliver peace. What is its weakness? Financing. We have to depend on the European Union. They have their own problems, as you pointed out. And so they give you timelines, not based on the situation, but based on their pockets. Thirdly, you cannot be, like I mentioned earlier, in a conflict zone and you do not get interest in other people's situations so that you help them if they are willing. Because the first point, they must be willing to listen. Otherwise, we are going to continue lamenting, adding another chapter on the book of Lamentations in the Bible and solve nothing. There was a mini genocide in 1965. Again, an attempt to disenfranchise the Kinyarwanda speakers in Eastern Congo. What you talked about, the 72 law, was an attempt to correct. It was an after effect of what had happened in 1965. Two, if you may recall, there was a genocide against the Banyamulenge in 2006, 2007. We had thousands of refugees who fled here at that time. And a good number of them were assisted by IOM to go to Canada. Now, as you are dealing with that, then you have what you have mentioned of the Rurankunda group. So you have the Banyamulenge, that was suppressed, then the Banyamasisi. So the current conflict, M23 are talking about, are the Banyamasisi in northern Kivu. North Kivu. So what are these pointing to? I would like to state that these conflicts in Congo are actually categorized into two. They are resource conflicts and ethnic conflict. Or identity conflict. So the ethnicization is talking about, that's the identity. People who are being told you are non-citizens. And you have heard words like go back to where? Now, interestingly, in the run-up to the peace process you have referred to, where Honorable Chiunga was chairing, we had eminent persons trying to help in resolving the conflict in Eastern Congo. You remember Nelson Mandela? After him, was it Mandela first or Nyerere? Nyerere first. And Nyerere is on record to have said this is a colonial problem and you cannot tell people to go away unless you are saying they are going with the territory. And I thought that was clear to the parties interested, but they seem to have ignored it for reasons I'm yet to know. Two, you cannot address the Congo conflict unless, like you put it in your remarks, you dealt with the question of who is controlling the resources in Congo. There are areas in Congo where a black man is not even allowed to reach. In this country, which is in Africa here. And you mentioned the MONUSCO, the UN. Since 1960, has anybody questioned why that problem has not ended? Despite the last version of the process, or rather the effort of the UN, being the most expensive UN operation since UN history, since the beginning of the United Nations. These are issues that should attract interest for investigation. Unfortunately, given my dress, I cannot divulge in what delve into addressing these issues. Otherwise, I may cause a diplomatic incident. But to your question, as UPDF would wish to see peace in Eastern Congo, because the construction of roads was not just a reapproachment, it was a pursuit of economic interests. That Ugandan businessmen, that the market for Uganda is actually Eastern Congo. And so, if you want to exploit that market, you must deal with infrastructure. Because as you know, the infrastructure are the blood veins of business or commerce. But as construction starts, M23 emerges, as he put it. That's a matter of interest that, again, I cannot discuss freely, as I said earlier. But we have done our part of ensuring the safety of the Ugandans on this side of the border. That does not make us sit and relax. So for Dr. Kiyonga and the Uganda government in general to have put efforts at that time, it was a manifestation of how serious we are about the stability in Eastern Congo. And for me, in my understanding, I was not informed, but in my understanding, the choice of Dr. Kiyonga was based on what you have just told us. He has relatives across the border. He was a minister of defense. He understood these matters of security better than any other person. And so he was a resource that the conflicting parties should have exploited to the maximum. Fast forward, the current phase, the East African Community Heads of State Summit did see a way forward as another attempt at the Dr. Kiyonga approach of a political settlement. So, erect an interventionist force, create a ceasefire, and then peace talks go on. So the mandate of the East African Intervention Force, ECRAF, as the acronym was to actually create an enabling environment for political discussions. It's history. When it came to 8th of December 2023, the force was told to pack and go. Because, in the words of Kinshasa government, we were supposed to fight M23. And that was contrary to the mandate the heads of state summit had given us. In my humble view, that's when the golden opportunity of dealing with M23 question was lost.
The implications of security of the region.
You see, we live in a conflict-prone region. You have the Sudan conflict system, the Horn of Africa conflict system, and the Great Lakes conflict system. These three feed on each other. Once you have a conflict in one of the three regions, it will spill over to other conflict systems. You have been dealing with the Horn of Africa. You are not even home and dry. You see what's happening in Ethiopia. You see what's happening in Somalia. You have seen what is happening in Sudan, the Sudan. You see what's happening in Central African Republic. I think there are about 3 or 4 sets of forces in Central African Republic, peacekeeping. Is there peace in Central Africa? Now, for us, the concern is that now you have a corridor for terrorism from the Sahel through Chad, Central Africa, down south, and linking up with the IS and Al-Shabaab in Somalia. It's just like you are following the Rift Valley, the eastern arm and the western arm. So this is a serious matter. So anything that threatens the stability in any of the member states around here creates room for those negative forces, as Doctor called them, who, or the enemies of peace, if I may use that word, that are going instead to exacerbate or to make the situation go from bad to worse.